and I ended up choosing Augie. And I think partly because it was close to my farm,
Sure.
I was still able to, get back and help, and my mom and dad could still come see games. So that was an easy decision.
And it went pretty well. I mean, this is, again, back in the days where those three schools were actual competitors in the North Central Conference in Division II together. And so what were those battles like?
Awesome battles. I think back and playing the state games, USD games, we would fill. That was when we played at the arena. All of our home games at Augie were at the arena too. So I think I counted one time. I think through high school and college, I probably played about 70 games in the arena, and it was a great venue for that. And we had good teams. State and USD were always pretty good. We ended up in '78 winning the North Central Con, which was a not an easy thing to do. UND, North Dakota State, Northern Iowa, Nebraska, Omaha. There were some really good basketball schools at the time, and I actually got to play with two of the better post guys that ever played at Augie. Both of them were 6'8", 6'9", and both of them were back-to-back MVPs of the league. So you can about imagine at that time, no three-point line. We had two really good big guys. The ball went inside quite a bit.
I bet.
And so my role then changed, to be real honest with you. I was still a factor because once in a while teams couldn't guard our big guys, so they would play zone. Well, that allowed me to kind of do what I needed to do. And I also played with a couple of good guards. Steve Creer, who ended up being my assistant at O'Gorman, was on the same team. He was a year younger. But we played together and had some fun times and had good teams. I mean, it wasn't always easy, but we were competitive and it was fun.
So you're getting to it. I failed to mention in our intro to start this chat that you scored 1,477 points as a high schooler at Parker. And oh, by the way, this is part of the reason why this upcoming September you're going to be in the South Dakota Sports Hall of Fame. So congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Late on that one.
Thank you.
We'll get to that toward the end. You're going in for all your accomplishments as a player and a coach. But yeah, what kind of player were you? And I'm not like how good were you, but like what was your style?
Yeah.
What made it work so well with not just individually, but obviously you're on some great teams in high school and college.
Yeah. And in high school, I was fortunate to play a long time and played 4 years. So didn't start as a freshman, but played. But then I started 3 years in high school. And I think what that allows, and there's a lot of guys like me that came through small town South Dakota that played a lot of basketball, played in some big games, and so you kind of get prepared to play, in front of crowds. You have the ball in your hands when it counts, all that stuff. And when I went to Augie, I was a shooter. I played point guard, but the style of play was, a lot different than it is today. I mean, there was post players, a lot of high-low interaction with the posts, not much movement on the perimeter. And so you relied on ball movement, you relied on, getting the ball inside for the best shot because there weren't an extra point for that 20-foot jump shot. Yeah. And I shot a lot of those in high school, and I shot a lot of them in college. But it was a different style because I think the most points we ever averaged in college was probably in the mid-60s, which isn't a lot of points in a college game today. Right. I mean, they're scoring 80, 90 points. In high school, we would probably average 70 points, but we were a little more fast-paced. And so anyway, my role, I played. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I probably could have went to a smaller school and played in a similar fashion as I did in high school, but I really always had my heart set on playing at the Division II North Central Conference level. I wanted to play in the same level as the Rick Nissens, the Ron Wiblemos, the guys that that played at South Dakota State, Augie, USD. That's where I wanted to be, and so that made my decision pretty easy.
And you did it, and you held your own.
Yeah, it was I always said I was 6'1". I probably was barely 6 foot, but it was a challenging. But yet, some of my best friends are still the guys I played with in college.
Sweet.
We got to play every year. We took a trip. I'll sidetrack here. We took a trip somewhere around the country where we would play, a Division I school. One year we played Kansas State. The next year we played somebody else. Well, one year this was the year I think I was a sophomore, and we played Butler, Valparaiso and Indiana State.
Ooh.
And there was a kid that played at Indiana State that really nobody heard of at the time, but it was Larry Bird. And I think there was somebody put it on Facebook where they pulled the excerpt out of the paper.
Yeah.
And it was funny to this day. Mel and I have talked about this where, we didn't know who Larry Bird was. And by halftime of that game, we knew who Larry Bird was.
Yeah.
He was 6'9". He could do. I mean, it was like, where did this guy come from?
What year was he? Do you know what year?
He would have been the same year classified as us. So he'd have been a sophomore that year.
Sophomore, okay.
So it wasn't until his junior, senior when they really started to make noise.
Yeah, and he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated and playing against Magic Johnson in the finals.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was one of those games where it was like, wow. But we played in the old Butler, the Coliseum where they filmed Hoosiers.
Yep.
And so that was pretty cool. But yeah, there were some really cool trips.
Did you play? Okay, no, you played Butler in Butler Fieldhouse. When you played Larry Bird in Indiana State, so he's known not just as one of the legendary players in NBA history, but trash talkers as well. Did he have that going on back as a sophomore at Indiana State?
I don't remember a lot of it. I just remember. So I told you we had the two best players in the North Central back to back, and one of them, Arvid Kramer, got drafted in the third round by the Utah Jazz. And so by halftime, Greg Nagel was the other. He was 6'8", and Arvid, and they were both on our team at the time. They came in at halftime, and they were looking at each other and said, "You're guarding him. I'm not guarding him." Nobody wanted to guard him. And it was like, this guy is just tearing us a new one. And it didn't matter where we guarded him. It was either if he went outside, he could shoot over the top of us. He went inside, he would get a shot. I mean, I think he had like 18 points and 7 rebounds at halftime. He probably ended up with 25 or 20. I don't know, but he was just. It was unbelievable how good he was.
It was just the skill. That was
skill. And at that size. I mean, he was. People didn't realize he looks proportionately. He maybe he doesn't look real big,
right.
But our guys were 6'9" and 6'8". Well, he was at least an inch bigger than the 6'9" guy, and he was a man. He was a big guy. But that was one of the highlights.
I can't imagine how many times you must have watched Larry Bird from there on out, watched his games, especially maybe if you're at a sports bar, and I'm sure you couldn't help yourself every now and then to point out, to tell that story.
Oh, it was fun, and people didn't believe me, so I had to show them the program. I actually had a program that I kept for whatever reason from that game. But I always remember I loved watching the NBA then during the kind of that 70s, 80s, 90s run and then Jordan came along. It was a fun game to watch. And so, but it was, I think, made it more intriguing to me because there were some guys that I remember were playing at the same time that we were playing in college. And we had gotten to a regional tournament where we were one game away from going to the Final Four in Division II, and we got beat. So we were close, but we just never quite got over that hump to get to that Final Four in Springfield. I think they played it in Springfield, but a lot of the guys, there were some good players in Division II and even NAIA back then that ended up in the pros. That oh yeah, we played him or we saw him play or whatever. Those guys, Maurice Cheeks was another one.
Now. Okay,
that was another kid or another guy.
Yeah.
So he
head coach too.
Yeah.
Wow. So, man, I'm curious as a guy who's obviously a lifelong basketball nut. You're like a lot of people, my age. I'm about 20 years younger than you, but that's the NBA 80s with Magic and Larry, Michael in his early years, Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boy Pistons, Stockton Malone. We're all nostalgic about that. We all thought that was, the cream of the crop. How do you watch that compared to today? Because I also talk to guys my age, like Chris Johnson, the coach at USF. He says it like, as far as the athleticism goes, the guys today would blow these other guys out of the water. But obviously, it's a different game, and there's a lot there for you to chew on there. Whether you like the type of basketball then versus the type now. But what are you thinking if you're comparing to that day when you watch games today, like the NBA Finals last night or whatever?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and I think it's one that gets hashed over a lot. But I remember when I was coaching in, early 80s into the 90s, obviously. So I was watching a lot of basketball because you want to try to pick up, not that your high school kids can do the same thing as the pros, but you might catch an out of bounds play. So I was watching it pretty intently, and I still watch pretty intently just to kind of see, okay, how are they playing? But I think I would agree, even in high school, the athletes right now in high school are much better physically.
Yeah.
I think because of all the athletic training components that are available to them. I don't know that they're any more skilled as far as shooting goes, but they are much more athletic. And I think going back to when you're describing, back in the 80s, there were some good athletes. I mean, you remember the Dominique Wilkins and the David Thompsons. So they were sprinkled in there. I think now you see for every one of them back in the 80s and 90s, there's 5 of those guys.
Yeah.
And they are just unbelievable, freakish athletes.
Yeah.
And now they're even bigger. And so, but I think the skill that they had back then, it was a physical game. I mean, there were guys, big physical post guys that, you came in the lane. You mentioned Detroit. I watched that documentary with Lambeer, and they wouldn't let you get a layup.
Yeah.
And so it was not an easy man's game. And now the physicality and the spacing in today's game, just watching what they do, a lot like the colleges do. Basketball is always kind of a copycat sport.
Sure.
Whatever's going on in the pros and college, everybody's going to be doing the same thing. And I think even more so now with the introduction of portal, because every year you're going to have a different group of guys. You better not be doing too much different, because that's what they've now been doing in their AAU careers, in their high school, college, whatever team they were on. You can't vary too much from the skill sets that they all have. And so now you see a much different game. There are staggered screens, there are back cuts, and the big guys are starting on the top of the floor. They'll work their way down in the post, but it's a lob and a dunk.
Yeah.
There's not very much back to the basket type play. And so that's changed completely. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm a fan or not. I don't really like today's NBA. I do watch the playoffs. I just don't like watching the regular season because I just don't think they play very hard. Now all of a sudden there's something on the line, and now it's like, everybody is getting after each other, and it's almost too physical.
Yeah, it's as somebody who kind of starts hopping on the Wolves train in February, March, especially when my basketball duties are done locally, calling games, state tournament once, and then now I've got more time to watch the Wolves.
It's right. You're a Wolves fan.
Well, I've become a Wolves fan living up here, and now they've gotten good. I mean, it was no fun to watch them when they sucked, which was most of the time. I grew up a Bulls fan before they started winning the titles, when they were kind of struggling at 500 and to break through in the playoffs in Jordan's early years. But anyway, you watch now, you can't overreact to what happens in February and March and April, even April in those NBA regular season games, because for everything you just said. But were you noticing, were you watching the game with that intent as like a college kid? Did you know you wanted to become a coach? Because I think you've mentioned you were a head coach right away.
Yeah, I was.
Right out of college.
I was, and I never was an assistant. I always thought maybe I should have been, but I was a head coach right out of school. And you kind of make your mistake. Colman, just east of Madison, just off the interstate.
Yep.
But yeah, I knew I was going to be a coach. I think after my first year of college, and it probably was somewhere between when I started taking that anatomy class or biology. I don't think I'm going to be a doctor, so I'm going to be a coach, and so I kind of migrated that direction. And but yeah, it was a good choice. If I had it to do over, I'd do the same thing. I don't think I would change a thing, just because I still love the game and I loved it then.
Yeah.
And life gets in the way, as we mentioned. I mean, this whole, guys that love coaching and do it for a long time, it's God bless them, because it's not easy. It wasn't easy back then, but it was just a different style and a different way to coach, because you didn't see the kids in the summer. I remember the day it changed in 1985. The Activities Association said, you guys can have open gyms now. You can work with your kids in the summer. And I think it was just kind of an answer to the fact that there were some coaches doing it already. And so rather than penalize them, they say, we'll open the doors to the gyms. You guys can all work with your kids. Mm-hmm. You can't you can't scrimmage other schools or play games, but you can have your kids in the gym.
Yeah.
And that's when the world changed, because now you didn't get paid more for it, but there was an expectation from year to year to year. If you're not doing your work in the summer, you're probably not going to be as competitive as you should be.
Yeah.
And so that didn't bother me. I loved being in the gym. But I'll tell you what, it does have a tendency as you get into, later in your years, it burns you out a little bit, because now there's more going on almost in the off season there is during the season.
Sure.
As you know. I mean, you mentioned kids playing sports in the summer, whether it's basketball, baseball.
It feels like that's where most of the recruiting is done too.
Yeah.
I mean, these coaches can go to, AAU tournaments where you got your collection of stars and coveted recruits all together. It seems like those are the more, for them, in the recruiting world, the more the more important games, I guess, because you're also measuring how they're doing against other elite players. And man, I'm sure we could talk for an hour about that. But Colman for how many years? Then West Central for how many years?
2 years at Colman and 6 years at West Central.
West Central, and you mentioned how, that was really interesting because you almost went to, or at least had a choice to go to West Central in high school. You went to Parker. I don't think those were ever big rivals, were they?
Not too much.
Playing at different levels.
Yeah, at the time West Central was Class A for a while.
Yeah.
When I was there, actually, for a couple of years, and they went back to Class B, so it never really was a rival.
Okay.
We always played each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, the funny thing about that is, I'll just make this brief. But so I'm applied for the job at West Central. Jim Utek had been the basketball coach, but he just wanted to do football. And so the job was open, and I thought, wow, I'm going to check that out. It's closer to at the time, my folks were still on the farm, and so I'd still go back and forth. And so anyway, I applied for the job. Superintendent calls me, and I go visit with him, and he says, I think we're going to offer you the job, but we got to take it to the board. And so I'm thinking, okay, so this is a weekend is passing. And I get a call on Monday from the board chair, a delightful lady, great lady. And anyway, she says, Mike, I find it really interesting that you want to be our head coach, but back in the early 70s, you didn't want to come to school here. And I'm thinking to myself, nobody told me that. I had no idea that was even going on. I do now, obviously, my dad. So I called, they offered me the job. But I called my dad and said, Dad, did we make a decision not to go to West Central when I was growing? Oh, yeah, we had to petition our farmland out of the West Central School District so we could be in Parker. That would have been nice to know maybe at the time, just so I could have responded. But it all worked out.
You got the job.
It's.
And you must, to get the job to Gorman, you must have had some pretty good teams at West Central.
We did, and actually Kent Colesrud, who's the girls' coach at O'Gorman, played for me for 2 years, and then he went to Dakota State. But we had some really good teams, and I left a good team. That was the hard part, going to O'Gorman. At the time, they had struggled for several years, and I had good kids coming. And I thought, well, I kind of always wanted to be I wanted to be in the biggest schools. I wanted to be back in Sioux Falls, and my wife had a good job she was a business manager at West Central, and she stayed there for over 30 years. But it was easy to get back and forth. But so anyway, I finally took the job at OG, and
what pushed you over the top? Just because you wanted to coach at that level?
Yeah, okay, that was kind of it. I mean, I had actually turned it down once, but Coach Keeter was the AD, and he and I our farms were like 2 miles apart, so we grew up very close, played against each other.
He's a Hartford guy, and he went to West Central.
He went to West Central. He was an excellent athlete there. But so anyway, he talked me into it, and I ended up going, and rest is history.
And you got him rocking and rolling pretty good. Those must have been exciting times. You mentioned getting to the state tournament for the first time in 20 years at the school. But I guess in general, to skim through all of it, how did you do it? How did you get them rolling again?
Yeah.
And obviously O'Gorman's never looked back since those days when you started coaching.
Well, I think, looking back at it, I mean, the culture, the football culture was very strong. And that didn't bother me, because I think looking at it, that doesn't scare me. I think, I know they have athletes. So those kids aren't just good football players because they're, I'll find some athletes. Well, you also had to kind of establish, that's why I learned a little bit about establishing culture. It just doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time sometimes, but I found some kids that wanted to play basketball, found some athletes that were playing football. I mentioned Ryan Folsom. Ryan was a Division I football player when he went to college, but I convinced him to play basketball. Chad McConnell was another one, a really good athlete at OG, baseball player, went to play on at Creighton. So I kind of went and found some kids and said, hey, come play basketball. Come work out in the gym. Let me see you. So anyway, it started like that. I'll just tell you this. The very first open gym I had after I'd signed the contract, school was out, and I'm all excited. I'd sent my letter out to probably 50 kids that I knew were in the program. And so Monday night, I was sitting in the gym just waiting for the kids to show up. It's 6 o'clock, nobody there. 6:15, nobody there. Finally, one person walks in the gym, and I thought, okay, well, they got one guy. He was looking for the band room. So that was how my first open gym went. Nobody showed up. So I had my work cut out. But obviously, you find kids, you nurture them, you get them to buy in, and then you start having a little bit of success. And thank God for those 3 sophomores that stayed with me till we got to the state tournament. Once we got to a state tournament again, that kind of turned the corner, because in '92 we went to the final and played Jason Sutherland's team in against Watertown, and they beat us out in Rapid. But that kind of we kind of had arrived. And then the next year I had another good team, except my best player blew his knee out in the summer, so I never got to coach the best of that team. But we made it back, and Huron beat us in the semis, and then they beat Watertown. Ryan Moores is the AD at Yankton. He was on that team. Jay Elwine was on that team. His son played at Huron.
Elwine, the all-time leading scorer at Huron until Blake broke it
and
won the state titles.
That's the connection there. But so Jay and I had a good visit about that. He was a really good high school player. Went to Augie, got hurt, unfortunately. Okay. But yeah, it all ties together, and I think that's the great thing about high school sports in South Dakota. Everybody has a connection. Yeah. And I'm old enough to have a lot of connections now as I go back, and really fun kind of visiting with you, just reminiscing.
I bet. Well, and I'm sure you're never lonely at state tournaments, I bet. You've got so many old friends to connect with that you played against, coached against, with, and all that stuff. It was really enjoyable to have you call a couple games there at the state tournament with us here at Midwest Sports Plus. Just a couple of the highlights and the hits. You've mentioned your first finals in '92. In '98, correct me if I'm wrong, you played a Brandon Valley team that had upset Mike Miller and Gary Munson and Mitchell. And that team you ran into Austin Hansen, correct? And he was one of the greats.
He was really good. Yeah. He was really good. That semifinal night, we played Spearfish. Spearfish was actually the 1 seed. We were the 4. Yeah. Brandon was 2 and Mitchell was 3, I believe. Yeah. And of course, Mike, everybody was just kind of, well, it's just a foregone conclusion they're going to be in the final. And lo and behold, it was Brandon's night. They beat him, and it was on a tough call. Mike fouled out late in the game, and I remember those Mitchell folks don't like to lose, and they were not happy. And so we had to play the next game, so we ended up winning, and then we ran into them in the next night. We ran into Austin and Chad Creesh and Joe Ford. Just a good group of athletes. And we played them at Brandon earlier in the year, and they beat us in overtime. So it wasn't like it was an upset. It was probably neither one of us were supposed to be in the final, to be real honest, because Spearfish was loaded. They had a really good team. I can't remember all those guys, but we played really well in the semis. And like I said, getting there is not always easy. Everybody said, oh, yeah, you got to win a final. Well, yeah, it would have been nice. It wasn't like we weren't trying. But I was always really felt good about being able to get to a final and playing good teams. And, you want to win. I coached my rear off, but, hey, it didn't happen. But, it was it was a really, really good high school basketball in AA that year, because there was some, Mike, Austin. There were Nathan Vogel, coach at Augustana, was my point guard.
Wow.
And he went on to play at Black Hill State. There were some really good college basketball players that ended up coming out of that group of 98.
And then we just zoom ahead, around 2002 is when you were able to, you're going to 3 more years, and that's going to be it. You're going to coach your sons. You walked through that, and your last 2 years, Mitch's last 2 years, you get to the final both years. Not just the finals, but getting there again. What was it like to coach Mitch? What were some of those things?
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun coaching my sons. I mean, Matt was, I look back, I always, say, were you harder on Matt than you were on Mitch? And I said, no, I think I was equally, I think what I always told him was, you don't have to be the best player, but you have to be one of the hardest workers. Yeah. And that was never a problem. They both worked hard. They put in the time. And the last 2 years with Mitch's teams, we were pretty good. We had Stephen Smith, who was 6'10" or 11. Yeah. He was a senior when all those other guys, Jesse Clark, Mitch, and Dusty Colman, Tyler Shaw, they were all juniors. Okay. And so Stephen was kind of he was the focal point. And so anyway, we end up in the final that year against Huron with Eric Hall. Yeah. And he and Mitch were teammates at USD, and we'd beaten Eric and his team at OG that year in an overtime. So really good games, but it was one of those times when all of a sudden, the coaches look at tape and, Stephen couldn't guard Eric Hall. Well, that ended up being a problem for us because they switched a bigger kid on to Stephen. Yeah. And so Stephen had to guard somebody else outside. So we were kind of in a mismatch problem. But it was a good game. Coach Budenhagen and I go way back. We had good visits over the years. And seeing his team this year progress, it didn't surprise me. Once they got healthy, their size was a problem. I mean, you saw them. I mean, they were big
and physicality
and physical, and they were good. And
absolutely.
To put your 6'10" kid on the perimeter because you got 3 other kids 6'7", 6'8", 6'8", that's kind of a good thing to have.
Yeah.
But good guy, just fun to coach against him. And then 2005 we ran at Mitchell.
Well,
Colonels.
yeah, I was going to say, your memories, you knew this was it for you.
Yep.
This is your last game, your last chance to win a state title. Mitch's last game, what do you remember best about that night?
Oh, it was a hard night, really hard night. Mitch and I talked about it because he remembers, and that particular tournament, he had gotten a virus, and so he wasn't feeling as well as he would have liked, but he played good. We got to the final one, but I just remember a lot of, you think about all of the years that you coached, and I had announced it because I wanted, and people knew, they wanted, because I was already working at my other job, as you mentioned, but I was hoping that the kids would make it about, hey, this is about you guys. I'm done. You're going to have a new coach the next year. We're going to do the best we can, and they just played their tails off. We were probably not supposed to get to the final. There were a couple other good teams. Mitchell was in a similar deal, but they were, not overly big. We weren't either, but very quick and could get after people, and we could score points. I think we scored 93 against Michael Tweed and the Peer Governors that
wow.
first round.
Michael Tweed went on to play North Dakota State.
Yeah, good, very good player.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a fun year. I think we were 21-3. We finished whatever it was, but yeah, it was fun. I was blessed again to be able to coach a lot of good kids and coaching my own. People always ask who was the best player you coached, and I thought, I hate to, you don't want to single out your own kid, but Mitch was probably the best player I've ever coached, just from that things he could do. He could be a point guard, he could be an off guard. In fact, he played both positions, but he could rebound. And I had other good kids that could do those kind of things too, but he had just that kind of competitive desire to just whatever he had to do, he was going to do.
Yeah.
And Matt was very similar. Didn't quite have the number of good players around Matt at the time, but Mitch played as a freshman, and we were pretty competitive. So my last 4 years of coaching was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet it was. I want to connect as we land the plane. I want to connect maybe the moments in the aftermath of the loss in your last game that you ever coached against Mitchell with Mitch, to when Mitch's first state title, who coincidentally they beat O'Gorman out in Rapid City, and the first moments you may have shared with him once they had won and celebrated there at Roosevelt.
Yeah, it was fun. I just remember it was. I was standing up in the kind of underneath the balcony because it was like, I can't watch this. I was probably the biggest wreck emotionally that I was, because not only was he in the final, and I'm thinking, okay, he's got a good chance here, but O'Gorman was really good.
Yeah.
And we had played him 2 other times earlier in the year and won really close games. I think one was by a point, another one was by 1 or 2 points. I mean, they were both, that was their only 2 losses.
Were you thinking about all this going on that year, or was there part of you that had a little PTSD from your coaching
a little
in
bit,
finals?
A little bit.
Okay.
I got to be honest. I mean, it was like, okay. I mean, it's almost to the point where I didn't want to go to the game.
Yeah.
And I've never felt that way. But anyway, as it progressed, and that one they ended up blowing them out.
Yeah.
And so I said, I've got to go down. I just couldn't wait to get down by the floor. I didn't want to go on the floor, but I got down by the floor, and my good friend Dave Dolan, who I officiated with, wanted me to come out and present the trophy. I said, no. I said, you do that. This is Mitch's time. I want to stand right here. And once the game was over, and I'll never forget, he made eye contact, and he comes over, and it was just, a really cool feeling to have your son do something that not only the coaching part, but to get to that pinnacle of winning a state title, and in the dominant fashion, because if you remember, they didn't have a close game. I think it was a 20-point game. I mean, still to this day, I don't remember very many tournaments, and I saw a lot of them where one team just pretty much dominated every game. And they were good, and they were. The year before was the COVID year, and all those guys were on that team, and I'm not so sure they were the 3rd seed that year. So I always wondered, if COVID didn't happen, how many, could he have won? You never know. I mean, there's always a lot of extenuating circumstances, but that was special. The next year, and Mitch knew they were going to be good.
Yeah,
in fact,
ran the table.
Yeah, Marcus Phillips, he was out in the locker room after his junior year when they won it. He said, he looks at Mitch and the guys, and we're going to do this again. And if you remember Marcus, 6'3" or 4 or 5, whatever he was.
Very strong pitcher at Tennessee.
Oh boy, I mean, you talk about a kid that he just had the it. I mean, whatever he did athletically, he was good at. I always wondered what he'd been like as a football player, but he's doing pretty well as a baseball player. But they were not going to be denied. That team was very, very special. They all played together since they were probably 5th grade, and that doesn't happen very often anymore, as you know. But that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that team a lot, and I enjoyed his other teams. I mean, leading up to this year, I really enjoyed this group of kids that he finished with. Glad they had a good finish, just because I knew Mitch was going to make that announcement. You don't want it to be a bad ending, and it wasn't a bad ending, obviously. They got, I think, where they needed to get to, short of a title, but they had a good finish, and I couldn't be more prouder of him and those kids.
As the guy who turned O'Gorman around for good and for the better part of 2 decades, what did you make of Derek Roby's run? Just continuing it. And
he did it. He did a fantastic job. I just remember, when I left, I knew there was good kids coming. We were loaded, and I knew that. And I told Coach Keeter, because we had talked about who was going to be the next coach, and there was a couple of really good candidates that I think would have, been good too. But Derek, I think he had the right temperament. The good thing was my coaching staff remained intact. He kept all those guys, and Steve Creer had been my teammate at Augie, and he had been my sophomore coach, and he had coached a lot of those kids when they were coming up through the elementary, junior high, and it was just a good idea to keep him close. And I think he was instrumental in helping Derek through those first couple of years, just to kind of get acclimated. Not that he couldn't have done it, but I don't think sometimes Steve gets the credit he deserves for being there and just kind of being that holdover. And because defensively there was no better coach. When he had the sophomores and got them ready, I told him, I said, I don't care what you do offensively, just get them ready for me to play defense at my level, and that's what he did. Okay. And so he was really good at that, and I'm glad he was able to kind of be a part of that. And we go a lot of connections over the years, and but Derek did a phenomenal job. I wish he could have finished a little better. I know he would have liked to, but hey, he had a great run.
Yeah, he was also known for taking those football players
and
yeah, turning those
absolutely.
into basketball teams. Did ever you see, you had a great career, obviously a very successful career after that. Did it ever, especially when state tournament time comes around, did it ever grate at you that you never got to hoist the trophy, or did you?
I kind of got past that. And I'll be honest, when Mitch won those two, that was like Coach Hoover even said, he says we finally got somebody in our coaching tree that has state titles. I mean, even he and Mitch talked quite a bit. I mean, I was surprised. He would call Mitch, and Mitch adored hearing from him.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't? I mean, Coach Hoover's 90+ years old and still sharp and still loves to talk basketball. And he would come to a few games. But yeah, it was special. And just seeing him do that. I mean, winning is great, but there are so many other things that you can take away from being able to coach and being able to be with players and enjoy people being around them is great.
Well, it's certainly applied. And you've mentioned this to your life after basketball with Sanford, because you were hired to do a lot of the skills that made you effective at that. And from a guy like Stu Whitney, who covered you, who just said you were one of his favorite coaches to talk to because you were mature and could handle it and talk like this after a loss, to guys who worked with you and for you at Sanford, who just said you were wonderful to work with because of your ability to mediate and to get people to come together and stuff like that. So it all checks out. It all makes sense.
I think coaches and teachers and people that have the skill set, and even in today's world, I mean, you can transition to a lot of things because, and I think teachers in particular, and not that I want them to leave education, but there's a lot of them that do, and I get a few calls from folks over the years. What made you decide? Were you afraid to do it? And I'll be honest, I mean, it's tough to step out of your box, especially when your comfort level is this, and now you're going to step into a whole new world. But I always tell people it's the best thing I ever did, and I would encourage anybody to do that because it just makes you think, it makes you get uncomfortable again, and I think being uncomfortable makes you better. And I always tell people that. I said, don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, because there are other things that you can do if you want to do that. And there are some great teachers who make it a lifelong deal. I name many of them, and several at Roosevelt that I've gotten to meet when Mitch has been there. Some great teachers there, and some great teachers in Sioux Falls. And I just hope they do stay in it. I wish they could be taken care of a little bit better financially, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother person. But anyway, I really have enjoyed this, John. And I enjoyed working with you out in Rapid at those tournaments.
It was a blast. You were a natural at that. Again, you're just casually, in a good way, just casually, just telling us what's going on, and it was a breeze. It was a blast, and so is this. I've always wanted to do this because of what just happened, all the great stories you have to tell. So thank you for making time to do this today.
Well, thank you for making time for me, because it's, I really didn't have much going on. My calendar is pretty light.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we got more to talk about. It's obvious you're very in tune with the issues of youth sports and high school basketball and sports, and we'll do that another time.
That would be a whole other topic, and I've got a lot of suggestions, but that's for another time. Okay. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Mike. Mike Begeman for video producer Cordell Wright, and for the folks at Gateway Lounge, happy hour, and cheers.
You need anything else, John?
No, I think I'm good, Greg. I think I'm going to tap out.
All right. Have a good night.